Are you corn-placent on the conveyor belt of your life? Do you have control? Compare and contrast the corners of your discomfort as you contemplate where you are and why you are here. Do you even remember how you got here? You consume the content, contort the context, consult your computer. Are you confused? Concerned? Are contusions left on your heart from all the inconsistencies and contradictions? Do you need to be consoled? With every pro, there is a corn. For every corn up, a corn down. Maybe it all balances itself out in the end. A yin and yang conjoined at the creases, conspiring a plan. It's as simple as you make it. Only as convoluted as you. Do nothing, be everything. Stay corned.
I suppose we can start by talking about any like upcoming projects you have, or your last or any tour plans or upcoming tour plans or songs or albums you've been working on lately.
Well, I always have a lot of projects going on, so let's see. This has just been a particularly busy time. I just released my book, which I've been working on for a long time, and this book is called Revelations in the Wink of an Eye, and it's my sort of extended literary critique of the comic book Watchmen, the Watchmen comic book from the 1980s. And I've been working on this kind of analysis book about Watchmen for a long time, and this year I finally published it. There hasn't been like an official album release from me in a few years. I've done a lot of kind of homemade releases, but the 2019 album Bad Wiring was the last really official release, like coming out on record labels and going through all of that process of distribution and manufacturing. So there's quite a lot going on with that, in terms of like what's getting announced in Germany on what date, and what's getting announced in the USA and England and France, and just trying to coordinate all these things. And I'm trying to slowly work on my new comic book issue, which is Static's issue number 3. I still have quite a lot of work to do on that. Very little time available to work on that as I'm kind of dealing with this other stuff. I try to get together with my bandmates Caitlin and Mallory once a week, usually on Tuesday evenings, to work out some new songs, work on some old songs. And since I usually take the winter off from playing live gigs for a few months, it's just a time to sort of workshop stuff and show them some new songs that I've been working on and see how that might develop with them, make some home recordings of some of the songs that I've been making this year. And then in addition to that, there's tour stuff coming up in the new year. There's like an Australia tour that'll be in late February into early March, and then there's the New York album release show, and then there's some America touring around the Midwest going into early April, and then there's some European and UK touring from late April into mid-May. So all of that stuff kind of looming on the horizon is like far enough away that I don't entirely have to get too stressed out about it, but it also does require a little bit of thinking in advance in terms of like, how much stuff do I want for those tours? How many comic books am I going to want to pack up? How many records am I going to want to pack up? Am I sold out of certain things that I need to start making more copies of? Is it possible to get the new comic book finished in time to take on that tour? Things like that. So there's, it's always just quite a lot of stuff, and probably some other things that I'm forgetting about.
Yeah, that is a lot of stuff. I'm real impressed by your ability to balance and kind of combine the art of comic book making with with music, because I took a comics class about a year ago, and I discovered that it's really fun, and I have all these ideas, and I'm like, oh, I've got all these ideas to make these comics. And then you start, like, writing them out and stuff, but drawing takes so long. And then also, like, trying to, keep a DIY music sort of situation going. It's like, it seems like a lot of work. How do you balance those two things?
Well, usually not very well. I always wish I was making a lot more stuff than I'm making, because, I mean, I really have to be pretty lucky to even manage to get out one comic book per year. And this year, I'm really just not going to make it, because the year is almost over, and I only have about 13 pages penciled of the new issue, which is like not much to show for myself for an entire year having gone by. And then it's the same with the songwriting. It's like, this is my first official album since 2019, the album that's coming out in a few months. So that's quite a large gap from 2019 to 2025. I mean, the pandemic is kind of an excuse, because that was a couple of years where I wasn't really able to be touring and developing stuff with my band as I otherwise might have. But, within the course of every year, I still try to write. I end up, writing a pile of songs each year, and I have been putting them on my Bandcamp page the last few years, kind of just a collection of home recordings from each year. But I really would like to be doing, obviously, less of, like, packing boxes, going to the post office, things like that, and spending those hours just sitting and drawing, because, like you say, it does take just a certain number of hours, quite a lot of hours of sitting and drawing to actually manifest a comic book into reality from a blank piece of paper. And I have all these people that my sort of team, my teammates keep expanding. Like, I have somebody here in New York that I'm paying to handle all my mail order stuff, like people that buy things from my website, so that I don't have to be the person packing and shipping the stuff that people buy from the website. And I have somebody else that I'm paying to do, help me with other administrative stuff, like currently we're trying to sort out my email lists, and it's just a sort of endless amount of things that are not actually making up songs and drawing comics and writing comics. The actual creative part of it is, at least currently, like a really small percentage. So that's like annoying to me, because, like I say, I do try to take the winters off from touring and gigging, just because, I'm like scared of driving in snow, or why confront bad weather, and there's all these other months of the year that would be nicer to play gigs. So I figure I take a few months to just be at home and work on the other things, which should be making comics. And but this year that's just not happening because there's too much stuff. Oh, then there's also this documentary about me that is having these had this debut screening in London last month. So I actually went to London to be part of like a Q&A thing for the screening of the documentary. That this guy Ilya Popenko made this film, and that's gonna be having more debuts in different areas. So that's kind of an exciting project. It's not really necessarily the movie that I would have made myself, but I'm not a filmmaker, so what do I know? This guy had an idea for a movie that he wanted to do, so he's kind of making the rounds of getting it into film festivals. And there was some talk of a screening happening in Portland at some point, but I don't really know what's going on with that. But that is a sort of other thing that is happening currently. And yeah, if I was just working on my comic book every day, if I had a few hours each day to get involved in that kind of meditative, focused labor, I'd be making a lot more progress on it than I am.
It must be a trip having like someone making a documentary about you. I imagine that's a weird feeling. But back when you were talking about like, I don't know, the time spent like going to the post office and all these like tedious details around like the music and art industry, especially when you're kind of a DIY artist. Just yesterday, pretty soon, I'm releasing a self-produced sort of album. I'm trying, like, I was like, I'm gonna do this one all on my own, see what my GarageBand recordings can kind of be like. And just yesterday I was like, I want to just practice my guitar. I want to sit down and play some guitar, and I just haven't had any time to do the actual art part of art making. And it's a hard thing to balance.
Yeah, it really it seems to go in the opposite direction of where you would think it would go. Like, the more kind of success or the more opportunities there are, that kind of ends up being less opportunities to just sit and mess around and make stuff up. If it's like, oh, well, now I have the chance to actually play a show in front of some people, and there's actually people that might want to buy my comic book. That means I have to, like, print more of them, or figure out how I'm going to mail those comics to those people. And, if I'm going to print more of them, does it make more sense to print 100 of them or 500? Because it's cheaper if I print 500, but then where am I going to put them? Or I got to move some stuff around in my apartment to put them somewhere. And it's kind of like, there's only so many hours in the day. So you just keep thinking, like, oh, I'll just add this task and add this task and add this task. But every task that you add is subtracting from that other time. But, the era when, like, nobody was paying any attention to stuff that I was making was just, pretty grueling in its own way. The isolation and the loneliness and the stress of that, it's not like I look back on the good old days when I did have nothing else to do but sit and make up songs or make comic books. I mean, that was a pretty miserable I'm definitely happier now than I was then. So, and I'm still managing to make stuff. And also, why should I make more stuff? How much stuff of mine does the world need? It's like, okay, what if I made 2 new comic books every year and an album every 6 months? Like, at a certain point, people are going to be like, God, I already have 15 Jeffery Lewis records. Why do I need 16 of them? Why do I need 17? So the slowdown is kind of like, it's probably good in general in that sense.
Yeah, which that kind of brings us to the question of like, are you making your art because, like, you feel like you should for the world and for people and to be doing the right thing for other people? Or are you making your art because you have no choice but to do it, being the person that you are?
Well, I think there's, the pandemic was really an interesting kind of way to view oneself when a lot is kind of stripped away from your life, and a lot of distractions, a lot of things in terms of just being stuck in your home or stuck in my apartment. That's, in my case here in New York. And it really did have this sense of, like, making me reevaluate what I enjoy doing when so many things are not available to be done. And I'm like, yeah, I really am I like working on projects. I just delight myself. If I come up with an idea, and I make that idea happen, it's just very exciting to me. It's just very fun. It's very delightful to just manifest some kooky random thing. I don't know why. It's a bit like letting yourself go insane. I mean, you have experienced that yourself when making the music that you're making, messing with the recording programs, putting stuff out in whatever way. It's a little bit of it's just sort of like succumbing to a certain kind of excitable madness. It's
it's really, really fun. All the things you're saying are very, very relatable. Like, I wouldn't be making music and art if it wasn't like what I felt like I should be doing. It almost feels like there's like this choiceless quality, and like, you only have so much time in a lifetime, and if you feel compelled to do this thing that, you feel like, I don't know, some sort of force within you is just like, this is the greatest thing, which just kind of like, it ties back to kind of the maddening reality of what it can mean to try to be an artist, particularly like a DIY one who doesn't have some sort of, you know, a lot of money for people to do all the tedious details for you. Because I feel like artists are typically the type of people who are particularly like bad and avoidant of like bureaucratical post office sort of stuff, you know? and then you have to be really good at it because you're like, well, I don't want to have a day job. I want to spend my time making art.
Right. Yeah, that was the idea. I mean, the whole reason I got involved in making music in the first place was that it seemed like that would be a way to avoid having a day job, and therefore I would have more time to make my comic books. But it really didn't work out that way. The music thing just absorbed so much more time. But it is all just fun. I mean, I think there's like an artistic high that I guess you could say is addictive in the way that, you know, I think of it like playing a slot machine. Not that I've ever really played slot machines, but you just sort of keep putting quarters in this machine or whatever it is, dollars, and you're just pulling that handle over and over again, trying to make something, and you can just fail over and over again and just lose and be like, this song isn't that great, or, you know, this drawing is very frustrating, I wish I was a better artist. And then just that once in a while when you make something and you pull that handle and you hit the jackpot, or you just make something that you feel is good or exciting, that you feel like, wow, I can't believe I made this thing, I'm excited about this. It's just such a good feeling that it just feeds that addiction to wanting to make more, even though the pain of all the failures, that I think that pain of really being confronted with your own mediocrity and all of the ways that you're just faced every time you're trying to make something, you're just face to face with all the ways that you're not great. Mm-hmm. And that is just so relentlessly painful because you just want to be great, because greatness is so pleasing. Like if I listen to a great record or, you know, look at somebody's great drawings, it's so great. I just want that greatness. It's so appealing and so like it just brings such excitement and joy that I just want my own stuff to bring me that kind of joy. And a lot of times it doesn't. And that's just like, you just feel like, I should just quit. I'm terrible. I'm just not good enough. But you just kind of keep on doing it because when you do feel good about it, it just feels so good that you just, it just creates this kind of addiction to the process, I guess.
Yeah. I almost feel like it's silly to think that you're only going to ever come up with good stuff. Like, I feel like nobody ever, even like, you know, the greatest people, it's like the reason people come up with great shit is because they just like show up for the process. And I find 100%. A lot of people get really hung up on the process. Like I find a lot of people like afraid to start a project because they're like, what if it sucks? And it's like, well, what, like, how are you gonna get to a place where you don't suck if you don't start somewhere? It's like you can't like hold yourself to the standard of like everything you make. And for me, I really just try to tune into the joy of the process. Like I really try to like let go of the perception of the outcome, even my own perception of the outcome, because in the end it's really just about like tuning into what you're doing. And sometimes like my best songs I feel like come out of nowhere. Like I'm just like do sit down, and then all of a sudden it's there. And then other times I'll spend years trying to write a song that I think sucks, but like it's not about how it's, or it shouldn't be, in my opinion, about how it's received. But this is making me think of one of your songs that I wanted to talk about. Ever since I discovered your music, like I have this feeling that like you're thinking my own thoughts in my head for me, but in another person. Like it's kind of like this uncanny sort of feeling of just like the thoughts you have and manifest in song, I feel like are often my internal narrative. Specifically, there's a few, but one of them relating to what we're talking about now is time trades. So I feel like that one is kind of maybe touching on the gist of the edges of some of the things we're talking about?
Yeah, well, those are, like you're saying, when you're making stuff, it's not even necessarily, you don't know how people are going to receive it, and maybe the stuff that you get the most excited about or less excited about doesn't match other people's perceptions, where, if you're playing a show or you're playing an open mic or whatever way you have of sharing what you're making with other people, it doesn't always line up. In fact, sometimes it doesn't line up much at all in terms of like what the other people think is exciting or unexciting is like sometimes the opposite of what I think is. But, you're just making stuff, and it's like everybody's going to take it differently, I guess. I mean, that song, I wouldn't have thought that song or a number of other songs of mine wouldn't necessarily have been the ones that I thought would be the ones that other people would point to as like the best ones, or, but that's, and then sometimes you start like wondering if other people are, and you're like, oh, if somebody says that Time Trades is one of my best songs, like, maybe it is. Maybe they're right, or I don't know, but it wasn't one that I wrote and thought, yeah, that's one of my best songs. It was just expressing, you're just always trying to express something that you're feeling or something that grabs your interest to pursue. And, when you're talking about like the percentage of things that the people that make more great stuff or make more stuff that you're like, you look to them and you're like, wow, that person, whether it's Bob Dylan or whoever it is, I really think it's because they just did more stuff. Like they just spent more hours creating. And actually, I just this thing about speaking of Dylan, like my band was when we were on tour in October, the tour passed through Tulsa, where's the kind of new Bob Dylan Center Museum, and there was a thing in there about so we got to go to the Bob Dylan Center Museum in Tulsa, Tulsa being a completely arbitrary location for that because it has nothing. Tulsa has no connection to Bob Dylan, but apparently the original draft of Like a Rolling Stone, which is like one of his more famous songs, was about 20 pages long. He just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and then boiled it down to the song that everybody knows. But it's just, yeah, like you were saying, you just make more. The more you make, then the more likely some of that stuff is going to be good, it seems to me. So you just, don't stop yourself from the process of making. Just if every individual thing you make isn't striking you as being great. But then I'm glad that people are scared to make stuff, because then there's less competition. I'm like, those of us who are like willing to go through that humiliating process of making less than great stuff and just feeling that horrible feeling of like, everything I'm making is just lame. It's only because very few people are willing to go through that humiliation that there's like less competition, because if every single person on my whole block was putting out songs every day and albums and comic books, like why would anybody have time to pay attention to mine? So
it's true, but like not everyone is like, a comic book maker or a songwriter. I do think it's kind of like a rare breed, someone who like decides to do something like that with their life. And also back to like the thought of like, well, kind of competition and kind of greatness and like holding yourself to certain standards based on certain people and like the quantity of stuff that you produce and then whittle down, is I sometimes feel like people are trying to hold themselves to a standard of greatness that isn't them but somebody else. And I think where truly like great music comes from is when people figure out how to do what only they can do with their own, specific mind. And like when people really figure out how to express themselves purely, and they're not trying to be Bob Dylan or trying to be something. That's the sort of stuff that like people like, I think. Like I think you definitely have that going on for you. Like there's no one really who, I mean there's people who write in your genre, but like no one's doing what you're doing. And it kind of ties back to like, you know, the song Time Trades, in the sense of like just the content, like what you're kind of circumambulating in your mind over that song, of just like it feels kind of just like this playful reckoning with limited hours in a day, limited years in a lifetime, but like the difference between like you either have to do something or like you get to do something, if that makes sense. Like you either have the mindset of like, I get to spend this time getting old and dying learning how to do something cool and fun for the sake of doing that.
You know, we are going to inevitably get worse. You know, it would be great if every year that went by we became more attractive and stronger and more physically capable or mentally capable, but we just degrade at a certain point. I think Jerry Seinfeld says something about how, like, I believe in God up to about age 35, and then God abandons you and leaves you to rot, or something like that. And the idea that you can develop your skills, whatever it is, whether it's like raising cattle or something, anything that you are developing a skill at, that skill can continue to get better. Hopefully, I mean, I would like to think so anyway. Even as the rest of you gets worse, maybe. I don't know. But that was, I would like to think that as I continue to get fugglier in my old age, at my current advanced age, and if I continue to live, I'll just keep disintegrating and getting in more funky condition. Hopefully my comics will get better. If you're talking about most bands and you're like, oh, this band has been around for 30 years, and you want to introduce your friend to them, you're probably not going to say, check out their most recent record. You'd probably be like, well, their first record's their best, or their early stuff. It's like very rare, at least in rock and roll. I mean, maybe that's not true in jazz or folk, perhaps. But it seems like in the rock and roll realm, it's very, very rare that people get better over time.
I think it has to do probably with genre and mindset and people letting themselves sort of atrophy in certain ways. But like, I kind of have like the opposite thought in some ways, which, I'm 31, so I'm not like old yet, but I feel like I feel like I'm so much better than I was in my 20s, and like I'm really excited. And I feel like if you just keep the wheels spinning, which like you seem to clearly be doing, I have no idea how old you are, but like your body does definitely degrade with age at a certain point. But I also think there are things that are less talked about that like get better with age if you allow them to. Like, I sometimes think about myself as a musician and just like how much better I've gotten in the last like 5 years of just because I've been doing it a lot, and I've been, exploring more realms, and there's just all these possibilities. And I sometimes like have this thought of myself as like an 80-year-old and being like, I'm gonna be so cool when I'm 80. Like the songs I'm writing, like maybe I'll get really into like I don't know, jazz and beatboxing in my 60s or something, and that'll be a whole other. I don't like, you have a lot of time to work, like time is like limited, but there's also like a lot of it, and especially if you kind of have an active mind, it's like I feel like you're just gonna keep getting better, especially with things like comics and writing. But like, I mean, your voice might get shittier, but I think your songwriting, if you keep writing songs, would get better.
Well, one would hope. I've actually been listening to a few Malvina Reynolds records recently. I pulled out my Malvina Reynolds albums the other day, and I think she started her career quite late in life. I mean, she sounds like, I don't know if she's in her 70s or something. on these albums. But yeah, there's a certain quality to her voice as somebody of that age where it has like no young person could make vocals that sounded like that. It's not that she's a great singer, in terms of like, I don't know. I mean, I don't even know how to judge what people use to technically judge these things, like pitch or whatever. I mean, I never hear. I just think of like what kind of personality am I getting from this? So yeah, I don't know. I mean, people's voices change over time, and maybe they don't have maybe they can't generate as much volume, or the range of notes they can produce might become limited at a certain age. But I think I don't know. I mean, I love The Fall, and Marky Smith just had such great, interesting vocals later on in The Fall's career, where he was like, oh, now that I'm old, my voice can like make these weird sounds, and I can kind of sound like an old man doing this, or I can, I guess, I mean, you just sort of find ways to play around with what sounds you can make. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, like what you're saying, and just being, continuing to be playful, having an active mind. I don't know. I mean, it's easier said than done. I mean, I could just sit here and be like, yeah, sure, I'm going to maintain having an active mind and being creative, but it's like, I don't know. Will I? I'll see what happens in the next, if I live, if the world lives, if things go on in some recognizable form where making comics and songs is even a thing, and if I'm a thing in 5 years, 10 years, every day as you're sort of starting again, you're like kind of facing a blank sheet of paper, and like, what am I going to do with this blank sheet of paper that's just never ends, it seems to me. In Portland, Oregon is one of my all-time favorite songwriters, Tony Green. And Tony Green, I guess he must be 60, and he just released a new album, and it's really fantastic. I think it's on Spotify now, and I just think it's very strong work. Every song has a really unique storytelling approach. All of his work really speaks to me in the sense of I just love things that are simultaneously funny and sad, and so that's a guy that's one of my favorite songwriters, Tony Green. So, and he's right there in Portland. So if you could find him.
Yeah, I haven't heard of him, and I'm definitely gonna look him up now, and maybe I'll track him down and interview him too. So I was in New York City with my harmonica player, Luke Anthony, and it was the only open mic we ended up going to while we were there. We were staying at the Carlton Arms Hotel, and we were just like, okay, let's go to this open mic, and we just found like the closest one by, and you were there. And I remember like when we were like in the audience, and then it's like, and Jeffery Lewis is next, we were kind of giggling to each other, be like, imagine if that's like the Jeffery Lewis, and we're like, no way. And then it was, and it was such a treat to see you there, just like at a regular open mic. And I just think that's so cool that you're kind of like, you're a cool person now that people know about, and you still show up to jangly little open mics. I guess, do you go to that open mic every week? Like,
I try to. They've actually been closed for renovations for a couple months, and they're going to reopen in a different location a few blocks away. So while that is kind of on hiatus, I have not been hitting any open mics. I'm glad you got to see it while I was there. I really liked that space. And that was really like a great way for me to have an excuse to have to make a new song every week, because I was like, I want to hit the open mic at least once a week, and I want to always have something new to try out. So I was, really keeping up with making new songs. And now, like the last couple of months, I've just really been slacking off on it. I haven't written anything new, because I'm just like, what's the point? The open mic's not there. Why make a new song if there's no open mic to play it at?
Yeah. Now, I took a video of the song, and I haven't gone back and watched it, but I just remember you had one line about how you shouldn't stick your wiener in a box fan. So that line was immediately edited out after that. It changed. I
tried it a few different ways. Well, that's the great thing about playing at an open mic. You write a song, and then just go over and play it at the open mic, and immediately realize while you're performing it what parts you're just like, oh, this is stupid, or this works, or this doesn't work. So I feel like that first open mic performance of anything, usually I immediately realize what needs to change. I think that line, I turned it into, it went through a few different changes, and maybe it was like never stick your finger in a rotating fan, never stick your face into a rotating fan, or it's something like, I tried a few different variations. I'm so embarrassed and mortified that somebody was there when the one variation happened to be never stick your wiener in a rotating fan. Why would I even write such a line? I guess it's stuck with you.
No, I loved it. And then later I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about how that stuck with me. And then I had this conversation with Luke later of I was like, I feel like people who choose to use the word wiener in conversation tend to be good people.
I changed the chorus. I was really kicking that one around into a few different shapes. It took the version of it that ended up getting recorded was last April. I had one day in a recording studio with my band, and we recorded 17 songs in one day, and that was one of them. And I put them all on my Bandcamp page. So it's called 2023 Tapes on my Bandcamp. So that song is on there, as well as a whole pile of other stuff that I recorded all in one day.
That's awesome. And I feel super lucky that I got to just, by happenstance of being in the moment, see the wiener version.
One of the few times that I've played that song live was at my band's last Portland gig, because my brother Jack, who lives in Portland, did specifically say that he liked that song. So because my brother was at that Portland show, I was like, why don't we try playing that song? It's called Fortune Favors the Bold is the title of that one. And we did play it in Portland in October on this last tour a couple months ago. And that was maybe we only played it once or twice on the tour, because I somehow once again, I just somehow got embarrassed about that song. We tried it a couple times. I'm always, we do different stuff every night, and there's so many songs on the list that I can pick from to try on stage. And the recording of it came out quite good. I really like the way it sounds on the recording on my Bandcamp page, but the playing it live, maybe there was one time I played it live where it felt really good to me, and then the other times I was like, I don't know, I'm not sure about this one.
It's funny how songs are like that. It kind of brings us back to an earlier part in the conversation. I'll sometimes sit on songs for years that I wrote so long ago and be like, this is a shit song, I'm never actually gonna play this. And then I suddenly play it for people and it becomes everyone's favorite song. And I'm like, what the shit? Like this, I didn't see that coming. So really, it's like everyone has their own perspective and internal world, and things hit them in different ways. So
that's very true. Mm-hmm. And of course, nowadays with streaming, I can literally just look at Spotify and be like, whoa, those are my songs that get the most streams? That doesn't make any sense to me. Why would those get so many more streams than my other songs that I think are better? So you can actually see that factor playing out in real time with your stream counts. So that's like a feature of the modern world.
Yeah, no, it is a trip. I do trip out about the same thing. Like the two songs on my Spotify that have gotten the most popular are like the most childish, ridiculous songs I have, and I think it's just really funny. But anyway, I suppose there's one other song of yours I just want to touch on, and then I was going to ask you what your favorite song you've ever written is, like ever, and then maybe like your most favorite recent song that you've written. But another one of your songs that just really hit home for me, where it really just kind of felt like you were in my head thinking my own thoughts for me, was a Krongu Green Slime. And it's because I think it just so perfectly captures this cosmic, objective perspective of reality, and then just how as conscious emotional beings, we take everything so personally and emotionally, and there's no way to get around that. And I feel like with that song, you were really able to zoom out and just, you know, you did it perfectly. You zoomed out and you captured just that thought very well. So what are your feelings on that song of yours?
Well, I'm really glad that you mentioned that one, because that is one that is kind of a personal favorite of mine. Like, I really like the simplicity of it. I like how it has, in a certain way, a kind of silly stupidity about it, and yet it's also kind of devastatingly tragic to me. And that combination, like I was saying, like, one of the things I love so much about Tony Green's songs is the way that they kind of make you laugh and cry at the same time. And I really admire that sense of our human existence, I feel like there's something really captured about the kind of palette of human emotions and experience that a lot of songwriters, it seems to me, they leave out humor. It's like a lot of people take things, they're kind of, whatever kind of art they're making, I feel like if you're trying to represent the human experience, there's so many shades of it that humor is a pretty important one. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like if something is kind of silly or stupid or, that element maybe makes somebody think that you're not taking it seriously, but that's like a pretty serious part of life. So yeah, the song, it's a little bit of an embarrassing song. I mean, I kind of came up with it while I was on a long bus ride, and I was just kind of in a half kind of sleepy, brainless condition as you get in when you're on a Greyhound bus for, hour after hour after hour.
The using humor to capture just kind of a devastating reality and how that that rubs some people the wrong way. But I feel like what else are you gonna do about, the way things are? But also with Cornologue Green Slime, like, it does that thing where it kind of highlights the devastating, reality of, everything is impermanent. We're all temporary, just, cheap shit that breaks. But also I feel like if you kind of look at it through a different lens, that same thing that makes it tragic also is a very peaceful, beautiful feeling of like, we all have our time here, and it's just all so much bigger than you,
Yeah, well, that's I guess that's an example of a pretty, very simple, stripped down song that I would call one of the ones that I like best. Of course, you wouldn't know it from the stream count. It's not like and another one that I really love the recording of, but it seems like nobody really has ever noticed it as a good song in my catalog, is Not Supposed to Be Wise, which is the last song on the Bad Wiring record. I remember when we made that record and I listened back to the album after it was finished and that song ended the record, it really struck me very powerfully, and it just did something to me, and I was like, oh man, that I really did something with that song. And it's like it maybe hit me harder than a lot of other songs that I've made in the last few years, but it's a little difficult to play live. I've done it live a number of times, but there's something about it's a little hard to play the guitar part and sing it and play the harmonica part correctly. It's like a challenging song to play, and it doesn't really seem to grab audiences or listeners from my experience of it. It's never a song that anybody has come up to me after a show and been like, hey, I was really touched by that song. So I don't know, that's one where I feel like it's kind of just me. Like, that song really kind of does something for me. I sort of start the song out by just kind of playing the guitar a little bit, and I record it into the guitar loop pedal that I have. And then throughout the song, I'm kind of there's a button on the pedal that makes the loop go backwards, and I'm kind of just randomly through the song. Sometimes I step on the pedal and have the loop going backwards, and sometimes I step on it and have the loop coming forwards. And there's something about that guitar part going backwards and forwards with the kind of flow of the song and the thoughts in the song that really sort of, when I hear it, when I do it live or when I listen, you know, the way I felt when I heard the recording of it, that really kind of, I was really like moved by that. You know, if I can say that about my own song. But the you know, the songs that other people like, the songs of my own that I think are my better songs, the ones that I think are my less good songs that maybe I don't know. There's certain songs that I just put a lot of work into that I'm very proud of as like a piece of writing where I really edited it quite a lot. Like, say, Sad Screaming Old Man, I'm very proud of, because I really worked a lot on that song to make that a very tight story with a lot of rhymes. Or songs that I just wrote very quickly that I like how raw they are. Like Heavy Heart on my first record is a song that I'm like, how did I make that song? I would never have the guts to make that kind of song now, I don't think, because it's so wonky and like it's kind of like a mess of a song, but it really... Like, it's one of my favorite ones that I've done. But that's, you know, when you're talking about like making stuff up and like just making up more stuff and hoping that some of it excites you, you just don't know what you're going to get. You kind of reach into the other dimension and you pull something out and it has some weird shape, but you just pull out some song that has never existed before and you pull it into our dimension and then you look at it and you're like, whoa, like what is this thing that I just made? Like, that's kind of interesting. Well, all right, let me go pull out another one from the other dimension. So it's just a very weird process, and it's, you know, enjoyable when it's not agonizing. There's, I don't know. I mean, obviously I've been doing this for a long time, so there's just piles of songs. You know, it's, and I hope to keep making more, because maybe my best song is yet unmade. Maybe I'm going to write one at some point that I'm like, wow, that is definitely the best thing I've ever done. I'll never do anything better than that. I'm just going to quit while I'm ahead.
I guarantee it. Well, I think you won't quit while you're ahead, but I think you'll keep writing better songs. I think you'll get better with age, like a fine cheese.
I'm sure, you know, some pretty high-level songwriters like Warren Zevon, you know, was probably like, why the heck is Werewolves of London my hit? Like, that's such a silly song. Meanwhile, I have all these, like, really heavy-hitting songs about the human condition and stuff, you know. So it's like, or, you know, I feel like that kind of thing probably applies to a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, and have a good afternoon, evening in New York City, going to the post office and stuff.
Yeah, all that exciting stuff. Cool. Later. Happy holidays. Bye.
We're not supposed to be wise if everything that learns also dies. It's a planet that just stumbles and cries, but I guess we're not supposed to be wise. Smart has gotta wash out to sea to make new room for inexperience and stupidity. Everything alive has just stumbles and cries. But I guess we're not supposed to be wise. It's a veil of thin illusion and silk, sleeping through a cold volcano of milk. It's a frustration when you enter or leave, a screaming nursery without a reprieve, where no one turns to someone when it just doesn't want to be, and then someone turns to no one. Such a stupid economy, where everything is desperate to crawl out of its line, and everything that's happening is for the first time. But I guess we're not supposed to be wise, if everything that learns also dies. It's a planet that just stumbles and cries. But I guess we're not supposed to be wise. Why do they show up with that look on their face? Why do they leave just when they can't be replaced? Why throw in the garbage well-trained artists and teachers? And what's so important about some new stupid creatures? There's a layer of biomass always churning and sifting, and in deference to ignorance it's endlessly shifting. So why attempt to get experience when time and sense hates you? Why attempt to get smarter when that's a crime against nature? 'Cause I guess we're not supposed to be wise, if everything that learns also dies. It's a planet that just stumbles and cries. But I guess we're not supposed to be wise.
You say you got a heavy heart. Say you got a heavy heart. You say you got a heavy heart. It's hard for you to start carrying your heavy old heart. You say you got a heavy load. You say you got a heavy load. You say you got a heavy load. Walking down the road, carrying your heavy old heart. And you sure don't know where you're going. Sure don't know where you're going. Sure don't know where you're going. I say the sun don't know when it's glowing. Flower don't know when it's growing. The river don't know when it's flowing. You're doing better than you know. You're doing better than you know.
I'm used to apartments with walls that are weak. Sometimes I'd hear it all if my neighbors would speak. But this recent apartment and bedroom that I got started out seeming decent, more boring than not. For 2 or 3 years, nothing happened at all. There was an old man next door that I would see in the hall. He shuffled politely, wears an old suit, you know, a standard old geezer, a quiet old coot. He used to seem normal, but then all at once, he started these nocturnal groanings and grunts. It's hard to get used to, it gives me the creeps pretty much every night now. He screams when he sleeps. Dark night of our souls, dark night of our hearts, dropping down the bottomless hole. I just need to get some sleep, I don't know when I might begin, but I don't want another minute in the same old story. Purgatory, stop the torture, old man, and please don't be myself from the future. If it was a dog bark or a screaming infant, I'd probably be fine, back asleep in an instant. But picture me lying there alone in my bed when this old man just lets out these shrieks near my head. And now every night at like 3 in the a.m., I get woken up by this miserable mayhem. Who's being dismembered? What the hell is wrong? I'm scared that he'll send me insane before long. And it makes me afraid just to be me like I am, 'cause it could be my fate, a lonely screaming old man. Tell me, what did he do in his youth for this torture? And what if I'm him and it's true that he's me in the future? Dark night of our souls, dark night of our hearts, dropping down the bottomless hole. I just need to get some sleep, I don't know when I might begin, but I don't want another minute in the same old story. Purgatory, stop the torture, old man, and please don't be myself from the future. I'm used to apartments with walls that are weak. Sometimes I'd hear it all if my neighbors would speak. But this recent apartment and bedroom that I got started out seeming decent, more boring than not. But now it's like trying to sleep in a Guantanamo cell block, or a hospital hellhole for some horrible shell shock, or a medieval dungeon with sadistic conditions where some pitiful someone is getting whipped while you listen. And you know, in the dark when your mind is just spinning and you get visions of weird things with no answer beginnings, I drift off for a bit and then he's screaming some more, and I'm scared that he's me and I'm the him from before. I get some paranoid fantasy sci-fi scenarios. They seem dumb in the daylight, but for now again there he goes. Dark night of our souls, dark night of our hearts, dropping down the bottomless hole. I just need to get some sleep, I don't know when I might begin, but I don't want another minute in the same old story. Purgatory, stop the torture, old man, and please don't be myself from the future.
Well, you know, Jeffrey, it's true what you say. I once was like you, but then I turned out this way. I lived my own life complaining love wasn't there. It was never enough to sacrifice for or care. And I once had a cat